All right, so we'll get started. Thank you for coming to Colloquium. We're very happy to have Rocco Di Pietro join us. He teaches at Columbus State Community College, and he was Berkshire Music Center and Tanglewood Fellow in 1971 to 72. He studied at Darmstadt in 1978 and lectured there again in 1990. He attended the Stockhausen courses in Curtin in 2001, and he wrote a book, Dialogues with Boulez, that he presented at Mills College, Urkham, and here at Stanford, where you're a frequent visitor. He was the SICA resident in 2009, so we're very happy to have you back. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The first thing I want to do is to thank Chris Chafe and John Chowning, especially John's Chowning's support when we played the Rogers in New York recently. So that was very, very, very nice to have old friends and to come back and see people here at Connie. Thank you. I'm trying to give an update, and one of the interesting things that has happened when we did the symphony at that time, Finale was not part of the symphony. So when I was in residence in 2009, Finale was a large diorama, a meta-collage, and it became the art of imaginal listening, a 5-movement symphony in progress. And I want to just talk about what is imaginal listening for me. And imaginal listening is different than what you might think. It is when you have an earworm, or when you have a neurological problem, and you are hearing music without, if I heard it, you wouldn't be able to hear it. And so it's music that is in the imagination, and it came from having a problem. Like all of my music comes from a place of having a problem. It means that I thought I was going to lose my hearing. And luckily it was just a vitamin A overload. But vitamin A takes a long time to get out of your body. And in the meantime, I started hearing music. So I said, this is a Giacometti opportunity for me. And Giacometti's been very important in my life. The most single artist, if I had to name one, it would be him. Because then, as it got better, I could look back on this thing as an opportunity, and I could see that the art of imaginal listening was a way to survive if I had gone deaf. That I would be able to keep going, because it would just be in my head. The music would just be in my head. And that I don't understand the relationship between that and, say, something that Oliver Sacks is doing. So I don't, because I don't really have that neurological problem, thank goodness. But it was interesting to me to make that leap, imaginative leap. So the first thing about the art of imaginal listening is that one has a very rich, imaginative life. And when you have that, it's a problem, because one's outer life should be more quiet. If everything in the inner life is so intense, the outer life, also becoming intense, gives way to a short circuit. So this short circuiting and pieces coming to me in dreams got started after I completed Finale and then decided that the Finale was the first movement of a symphony. So with that symphony, which I was unable to attend in 2012 because of my gout, I became a vegetarian. And now I'm walking fine. So that's another lesson. And all these things are part of the music. What is a dream quote? What is a bricolage of a Finale? We have cello and drones and orchestra and a work that came in a dream. And it's a series of tuttes. And tuttes of other people's music that are held together by an errant cellist. This cellist is a journeyman who is dreaming as all of the tuttes in the dream of Western concert music go by, which is part of the name finale. And what happens? It ends up, well, the orchestra in the dream slips off into the Pacific during a cataclysmic earthquake. And then what happens is China rescues the orchestra. And I wake up and the piece is over. And Jindong Kai was on the mountain in the dream. We were having a glass of wine, maybe San Jose, wherever. Somehow we were overlooking the Pacific and we were safe, and half of California went in the water, and the orchestra was in there, so there was the dream, and when I woke, the orchestra was rescued. So here's the beginning of an imaginal symphony in which the first movement is the end of the orchestra. Then we move on to the next one, the Dome. This is also a dream piece, but this took place in Florence, in my hotel. And we go to the next one. It takes up where finale leaves off, with tutis, but this time there's no more history of the collage. I'm in the Duomo, in the ceiling of the Duomo, the church in Florence, and I'm falling from the ceiling down to the floor, slowly. And I woke up with the earworm, and I remembered every note of the earworm, da-da-da, 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 a fanfare. And instead of saints, on the walls of the church were African masks. And there were two composers peering through these African masks, and one was Gesualdo, and the other was Busoni. So this piece called The Dome is not as advanced a bricolage, it's more a diorama, heading somewhere. And the same cellist, so it's a cello symphony, plays through this thing and finds its way towards the end. And at the end, there's an announcement, because during the dream I don't actually hit the floor, but I wake up each time. There's an announcement of the next piece that will come. And the next piece is prayer. Again, for cello, but this time with choir and orchestra. Now, the collage is done. No more quotations, and they weren't simple collages to begin with. They were bricolages in Claude Lévi-Strauss's sense. A bricolage is something much more complex than a collage. And in the prayer, you have a through composed piece. So this is just the third movement of 5 movements. And what will happen is the cello is reduced to no more. He was a gadfly in finale. He was an observer in the dome. And now he's reduced to arpeggios in an actual prayer, which is dedicated to Abreu and the wonderful work that El Sistema has done with the children. And also is dedicated to Bruno Goerning, a German healer, since I'm so interested in healing. And so that's a complete development of the imaginal listening. And it will go into 2 more movements. The 4th movement, which is underway, which is called the art of integrated imaginal listening. So integrating everything. And an infernal machine will come back, a virtuoso piece with the cello. And this time, the quotes are not real. They're just music I made up as if I was quoting something, but they're all my own quotes. And in the last movement, the 5th movement, a landscape, the image of Lilith will hover over a different kind of music altogether, a music in plein air. So I'm in a very peculiar position of moving inspirationally between 2 things that don't make any sense at all. Giacometti, David Hockney. When you think about that, that's pretty mind-blowing. I mean, or you could say, okay, Picasso and Matisse, that's more understandable, but Giacometti, David Hockney. So Giacometti is like a visual artist who is very important to me, but then I discovered something in Hockney that also will come out in the next pieces. So this idea of doing something in plein air and not being in the position of being able to reinvent the avant-garde. I just can't do it anymore. So I don't want to do that for myself. I want to use whatever has happened to me, but for some reason, all the music of the world, before what happened to me when I was 17 or 18 is where I'm at now. I'm listening to the things that I listened to between 12 and 17, before Lucas Voss hit me with equity, before he introduced me to Cage, before he introduced me to Duchamp, which just like completely rocked my world, changed everything. So now I want to listen to and reintegrate this old, now fresh music, and Hackney does that. Hackney does that in painting. He wrote a book about rediscovering the old techniques of the old masters, which I find really interesting. But it's like he's inspired by that secret work Duchamp was doing in 20 years. Right? Retinal painting, no, you don't do that anymore. But Duchamp was doing it. And Cage's response to that was two things. He sold out, or a great body of work. Well, wait a minute, I said, John Cage talks about a great body of work? This is a paradox. Wait a minute. A great body of work he's talking about? Well, only a great body of work could encompass such a reversal. Those are the two things he said. And Duchamp waited till he died to shock us all. And that kind of thing is very interesting to me. So Hockney's just run with the ball. Oh, well, I can do retinal painting like Courbet in plein air. And that's going to lead us to the next thing. These taubes. Taube is a made-up word. I had the idea for this when I was 17, but after I met my teacher, Lucas Voss, I couldn't do this project, and everybody said, it's impossible to do this. This is crazy. I want to make cameo portraits of things. Here are some of the performers that were using Ramsey Sadaka, cello, and David Tomasachi. These are musicians I work with, and some students. Tyler is a current student, Chelsea, Abigail Fabian is a former student, of course Marty Knapp, and his son Alex. The taubes are you can go to the next one. The taubes are an attempt. I wanted to be a painter, and then the piano came and I lost it. I always wanted to be a visual artist. And they are an attempt to get something out of something visual and turn it into music. So there's some different elements, and there's a long history of this. I've been doing cameo portraits. I've been doing so this just didn't happen. It took about 43 years for me to come back to something I wanted to do when I was 17. Aaron, all the taubes have a halo, and if you notice up at the top, they're pack chords. The halos are made up of these perfect authentic cadences. Everyone has a halo. Everyone has an outer monogram. So you take the name and the letters of the musical letters of their name that work. Aaron's two musical letters are E and B flat. So that diabolus interval. Then she has a inner melody. I had to come up with an inner melody for each one. She also has, at the bottom, a haunting wraith, which they all have, because each one becomes everybody. And that's a great nuisance. That's a Giacometti problem. Each one becomes everybody. Each one is holy. So there's a haunting wraith. At the top, there's some background of the same instruments we're going to use for the rajas. So there's a background sound, and each one has an introduction that is an announcement of the piece that has actually nothing to do with the taube, but it's more like a revenant or something watching this. So let's hear a little bit of this, and this is very much in progress. This is simply in progress. This is far from complete. I'm working on having 40 or 50 of these for a gallery exhibit, in which, in the end, they become all nudes. So that is going to be quite a trick. Immediately when I saw nudes, I saw flourishes of white diatonic notes for the women and flourishes of black pentatonic notes for the men. I have no idea where these things come from. Let's hear a little of it, Aaron. That's her introduction. There's the background in the ragini. That's her monogram. There's her inner melody in the trumpet. The trombone picks up the inner melody. There's the halo. There's coming up the haunting wraith. The snapshot's over. So it's supposed to be 35 seconds to 55, but I have such a sense of time that Marty tells me they're 2 minutes. But in my mind, they're 35 seconds to 55 seconds. I'm going to work to get them down. The haunting wraith shocked me. I have no idea where it came from. So I'm reintegrating these tonal elements, and the haunting wraith will appear for all of them as exactly the same, but in modulation. They will be modulated. Let's look a little bit at Michael. You have a different monogram, obviously, for his name. And I came up with a inner melody. Sometimes the inner melodies come from Hindu melodies, or they come from, I don't know how I arrive at them. It depends on the impression I have. So it's not simply visual, but a long, complicated set of sensations. Knowing the person really helps. So when I look at the person and then I know things about the person, that really helps me to do this. So this is like a sensation of knowing, a sensation of knowing things about them, a sensation of looking. Each person actually makes the music, which is interesting. But obviously I can't, I could talk nonsense forever on it because it doesn't matter. I only know that it comes, it's an intuition. Let's hear a little bit. There's his introduction. Now, why I gave him an introduction from something I wrote when I was 17, I have no idea. That's a fragment from a 17-year-old. The electronic ragini comes in. Now his monogram. He has a kind of cuckoo theme that comes in there later on. There. those are perfect authentic cadences. Why do we teach these things? You know, they exist. We put them in textbooks. There's this haunting wraith. Click, the snapshot should be over. Yeah. Chelsea, you can go back. She wants to be a pop singer, so let's see what happens. She has a completely different monogram, and she has a different inner melody. Let's hear a little of that. So here's her introduction. Has nothing to do with anything. It's an introduction. Because that one's a little short. And I say it has nothing to do with anything. I think, what I mean by that is it's outside the picture. It's like a Gauguin idol. You know, when you see Gauguin, all of a sudden there's something outside of the composition looking in like that. This is an idol looking in, and that's what those are about. Let's go to Derek. Now, Derek has a very existential picture there, but his music is completely happy. I don't know how that happened. And he picked that one himself. So it's often very difficult to work with a smile, but in Michael's case it was okay, the smile worked. But with Derek, he picked that one, and then different elements came out. It was different. Let's hear just a little bit of this with Derek. Too slow. So I give the tempo, he picks it up. quote Yves Bonafide and put in some of these to give you an idea of where I was coming from with some of this. What happens when life takes the initiative for you without your collaboration? And bringing to an end a situation that seemed unbearable, is that not what we once called grace? Because these people are, it's quite a nuisance to look at all these people as dead. And to see each person as everyone is quite a nuisance. Concerned with the unity underlying images. So here we want to look at, I mean, can we talk about this in music? I don't know. Let's say, if Chrissy would come and, do we have the Debussy?
Oh, sure.
I mean, can we agree that an image can be made in sound? I mean, this has happened before. The girl with the flaxen hair. So what? Impressionism, symbolism. We have to make a leap that that's a girl with the flaxen hair. So I mean, this stuff has been done before, right? That's quite a leap. What about what else do you have there? Is that General Levine?
No.
No. Do you have the doll? Could we hear a little of that? Does this sound like a doll? Can we do it again? Please. Villalobos, a set of pieces about the baby's world, the baby's doll, or the Debussy, or Satie, or who else did portraits of people with names, symbolism. Anyway, along comes experience. Listening, born of music in the head, not heard, not hearing per se, gets mixed up with this. So, seeing heads in a void, in a space that surrounds them, a head as an object like any other, something alive, but also dead. Stepping over a threshold as if entering an unseen world, all living people were dead, and the world crumbled. So that's where I was coming with this. I mean, obviously they're alive, but I told you I was very influenced by Giacometti. Listening became more of a task as an artist, to accept the finite nature, and to return to that which could cause distress, even terror, into an opportunity for spiritual recovery, which would govern the artist's vision and moral behavior of the individual. I like that. I mean, I live that. So it's not academic. It's amazing to, it's a great bird. It's a series of hauntings colliding with the impossible that turn back on themselves. And through such signs, which contain halos and bases, each one is a stela. Those are stelas in sound. And when I first started this, I thought I can only do heads. Now I'm going to start to do torsos. And then from torsos, full bodies. It's a kind of faithful adherence to being, not becoming. And I like this idea of reflections on the projection of the self into being. And also using all this material that I said was so contradictory. I mean, it is really contradictory. It is paradox to talk about Giacometti and David Hockney in the same sentence. That's just absolute paradox. But again, for me, that paradox replaces all certainty and is more real than any certainty. And, because in my generation, you were terrorized by the obscurity of Adorno, the terrorist. Adorno was such a terrorist. And what did he really talk about? You shouldn't smile in the 1920s. In the 1930s, that's not a time you can smile. So Stravinsky is bad. And, well, that's all over and seems rather provincial now. And what would he have said about Villalobos? He would have hated it. So in other words, the world is caught up with this incredible thing where the whole of the avant-garde movement might have just been a little glimpse. Yet I can't say it didn't happen to me and it didn't affect me immensely. And it wouldn't be what I am without that. But at the same time, the world is bigger than that. So one has the Holocaust over here, and one is dancing samba over there. I didn't create it. So that's where this comes up, this existential situation comes up, and I'm just trying to, this just came out of nowhere, this series of ideas. So if I can get 40 or 50 of these, and in the way I do it is I have models in a gallery. So Derek, in the last performance, sits on a chair next to his portrait on an easel, and they're framed. That's how this thing's going to go, with the models sitting there. And we're going to move. Now, I want to just briefly show you some of the precursors to this, because I've been thinking about making portraits of people in sound, and nothing this literal before. So maybe Christy and I will play a couple pieces for you of from the Serata. The Serata is a farewell, and sorry. Oh, I was going to show you. It exists also as an installation. These are people I play piano with, piano four hands with. And in one version, they come up, hold their picture, and place it on an easel, and then they come up and play their four-hand portrait with me. When the series is done, I look at the set of figures, and the piece is over. This is not that version, obviously. We'll just play a couple. That was a portrait of a musical friend of mine called Ramzi Sadaka, and I called it Ramzatiko, and because he's a young composer who has a very mystical tendency. The next one is called Abbyissimo, for Abby. Whereas Ramzi's cameo was straightforward and one single impression, emotional impression, this one is a double kind of. A lot of the portraits of people are divided by black and white parts of themselves, and you'll hear that in this one. Leonides, a young Mexican with a Greek name. I took a little Mexican tune, and you can hear it. It's affectionate. Antonino is a young composer. His name is Anthony Vine. Let's see what you make of this. I lost the thread a little bit on that because I was thinking of what to tell you. Davidissimo. Davidissimo. You will hear Silent Night and Babbitt. And we'll finish, there's 8 of these, but we'll finish with this one, Claudius. There's no photo for Claude. He's from Ecuador. He doesn't ever have a picture taken of himself, so he just has a painting. Now, the last piece is a little bit earlier, 2009 to 2012, has many different versions. I began it here when I was here in 2009. I started to get stories and collect stories. I like to write, and that's another, so between the visual and the literary, I came up with this idea. I was very moved when I read Joan Metallic's interview with John Cage. And so the rajas for John Cage, an Indian term, came up out of being moved by some of the paradoxes that I noticed when he said that he admitted in an interview that went on for quite a while in that book about the disturbing qualities of something that had happened to him, and I'll read that more specifically. So he had a possible turning, but he died a few weeks, about 6 weeks after this incident happened. I was very moved by that, so I wanted to make an homage to Cage in different versions. And they are for recital and communal improvisers of pseudo-Asian instruments. The violin, if in fact you could come up now, the Rogers Orchestra, and I'll introduce each of the instruments. I like pseudo-instruments and broken down instruments. For instance, that mandolin is in very bad shape. And often times when I do this with different ensembles, I don't want to know how to play the instrument. That's a very important thing. I don't want to know how to play the instrument. I want to make something, I want to develop a new relationship to the instrument in the improvisation. It's to the left of deep listening. It is not like Pauline's deep listening, and it is certainly not like John Zorn's Cobra, which I played in. So it's a kind of different kind of improvisation that allows for it's an ambient improvisation. Rob Hamilton has the bouzouki, which he's also detuned. We can make a little sound there, and then that mandolin. Yeah, and this is the Hindu Shruti box that Andrew Raymond is going to play with. It's a very loud instrument, so it has to be muffled. Yeah, that will be our drone. Thank you. Jay Caddis is going to play the violin as a Japanese biwa. Yeah. Alex Rollernap has, what is the name of that instrument? Can you tell me, Rob? Does anyone know the name of that instrument? It's an African instrument, right? I don't know the name of it.
Handmade marimba?
It's a marimba of a kind, yeah. And it has an interesting sound. He also has the steel drum. Yeah. And this Indonesian instrument, which no one seems to remember the name of either, but that's okay. It has a very beautiful sound. Chris remembers the name of it, he'll tell me. Martinek is playing the electronic ragini.
I think it's an ankle.
Oh.
Ankle, yeah.
Ah, thank you. Thank you. I'm going to play the Thai mouth organ, and it's not a Ken, the way you know, it's a Thai mouth organ, and a harmonica, and Chrissy's going to play on the piano, and then I will also recite. So we're going to give you a version of Rajas for John Cage. Good artists don't have lives anymore. Their life is reduced to telling stories that others can believe are their own. So foolish. He was thinking a lot about John Cage. You could say in a way that was similar to the way Octavio Paz thought about Marcel Duchamp. Specifically when Cage told Joan Retallack, "We can't keep our sight local to achieve a glimmer of utopia." Then he told her something that might have revealed that he was in the middle of a systems change. The sum of my impression after being mugged the other day was, how is it that I could be so foolish to be optimistic? John Cage died a few weeks later struggling to keep the Cagean agenda going. The author was deeply moved by that and decided to collect these stories that might account for more than just optimism, finally rejecting both optimism and pessimism. So wunderbar. Her name was Karuna, and she was taking her first walk in the neighborhood. She had on an adorable little dress that floated in the summer breeze with sweet matching sneakers. As she came to each flower along the way, she exclaimed in ecstasy, "How beautiful! So beautiful!" Looking at a leaf, she saw that thing that is alive in that leaf. The walk took an eternity. So beautiful. Yes, her German companion reiterated, "So wonderful." She watched the red light turn from red to green. So wunderbar. So wunderbar. So wunderbar. Intake. A mother was found force-feeding her 3-year-old child, who was bloody and screaming. Cursing, she threatened to cut the child into 100 pieces if he did not eat. They brought the mother to intake. She had no teeth, a dazed, wild look in her eyes. She calmly said to the caseworker, "It wouldn't eat." The Chinese Princess. A group of artists had assembled at a Chinese restaurant just above San Francisco's North Beach area at the corner of McAllister, when all of a sudden a taxi came to a screeching halt. Out hopped an infuriated Chinese princess. She had white taffeta wings, an exotic headdress with a jeweled tutu, and shiny, tight sequin stockings. Her face was painted in a myriad of floral shades. She was throwing money on the ground and screaming at the driver. She made her way into the restaurant to the amazement of the young artists. She composed herself, sat down, and ordered 2 dinners, obviously expecting company. She became more and more agitated as it became apparent that her companion was not coming. She began sobbing uncontrollably and making a scene with the waitress, yelling at her in Chinese. Pulling out a wad of $100 bills, she threw smaller denominations on the floor, exclaiming in English, "You pick it up." The scene accelerated into panic as the tears running down her face made her makeup wear off, clearly revealing the face of a man. The anxious looks in the eyes of the patrons made one wonder, did she have a gun? The management came out threatening to call the police, enraging her further. She refused to pay the bill. As she made her way to the door, now followed by the cooks, she threw single-dollar bills on the floor, which they picked up. Once outside the doorway, they burst into a chorus of invective in Chinese, screaming at each other, the cooks now waving knives. She continued to pay the bill dollar by dollar on the sidewalk. But now outnumbered and intimidated by the knives, this unrequited Turandot vanished into the night. The tourists. On top of the world, the view from the Gran Sasso Mountains in the Abruzzi was an adventure that explained everything to some travelers the locals called the Grandi Turisti. 2 hours from Rome, it seemed like the Middle Ages. It was a far cry from the exhibit at the Villa Borghese, showing Francis Bacon's paintings juxtaposed with Caravaggio, and an eternity from Florence, where they had just seen at the Uffizi Robert Mapplethorpe's black nudes under every sculpture of Michelangelo. From that view they had an insight into another view, surrounded by the dreaded padrones. They squeezed everything out of you until you were forced to immigrate. They told the tourist stories of how when the last bus stopped at Montorio Valvomano, you had to walk the 12 kilometers to get to the top of the world. You were blown to the wind with no scudi. You found dangerous work in Belgian mines before immigrating again to Canada or the US, where working at the New York Central Railroad, you lost your arm with no recompense and returned to the mines, this time with a strap on your good arm, to dig coal and raise 9 children. Epic, heroic lives. La Ventura to these conserving people meant the conservative was the enemy. The Romans had a hard time with them, and the Vatican seemed very far off indeed. Encounter. A young musician got his first union card to perform on the celesta in a legendary Battle of the Bands marathon. It was March 17, 1970, and the Grateful Dead, the Buffalo Philharmonic, and John Cage were all on the same program with Lucas Foss. The young celesta player played in several sets with the Dead and Foss. When it came to the premiere of Cage's Variations 3, the young musician could not understand why one anarchist had to obey the rules of another. He turned the performance into a kind of celesta concerto, thereby almost sabotaging Variations 3, until one of the musicians stopped him. The voice of Cage went on lecturing. After the performance, it was reported that Cage laughed, remarking, "It was like some kind of crazy bird got let loose." Lost in the vastness of the rock audience, the laser light show, and the smoke, the young celesta anarchist disappeared into the night. Bologna. A foreign woman was walking down the Via Stalingrado to catch a bus while thinking about the paradox of Bologna. She veered off to the main piazza on her leisurely stroll, overwhelmed by the spectacle of a bustling chocolate convention that was across from the wall where hundreds of photos were mounted of dead partisans the Nazis had shot. She noted the fountain with a sculpture of a nude woman with water spurting out of all her openings. She was ruminating that this must have been the last image these resistance fighters saw on Earth, when she suddenly saw a large public bus that pulled up with a huge black sign on its backside that had 4 white statements, each with a box in its side. The statements read, heterosexual, homosexual, metrosexual, non importante. The last box was marked with a bold red check. The bus pulled away without her. Water report. A water quality scientist who was moonlighting in the health field at a natural medicine store was trying to make interdisciplinary connections in his research. He was investigating Japanese water imaging and this summer's anomalous barometric pressure changes. This was the same summer that had extraordinary ozone warning days, record levels of extreme allergic reactions among his clients, and severe tree and weed allergies. The trees especially were in overdrive for having the highest reactions to their pollens on record. His thesis was that people who were allergic to things were the Earth's antennae to catastrophic change, climate change. The Earth was sick, he said, from all this furious industry of a certain kind of people wedded to becoming, a becoming society. The being cultures, as he put it, were dying out, and the Earth was suffering from this so what, dust to dust attitude. The scientist reported to his client, who only came into the store for some supplements, that all this resulted in a wave of eustachian tube dysfunction, with patients who then came to the store for herbal medicines. He noticed too the extra high levels of depressed peoples all over the planet, and told his client he had to be extra careful in this matter. After his lecture on water purity at an international conference he attended, he noticed in his discussions a number of Japanese scientists who knew exactly what was going on with the Earth, but everybody agreed the information could not be released to the media for fear of waves of mass suicides. In fact, it was his opinion that the last president was right in hiring some so-called prominent nuclear physicists who know nothing about climatology, i.e., the wrong kind of experts, to deceive a public that was all too willing to be deceived on the subject of global warming. After all, he said, for a nation that knows absolutely nothing about the Middle Ages, it's unthinkable. The playground must go on. Right meditation. Right meditation. Kriya. Chronos. Krotan. Gaia. Uranus. Ixion. Janus. Linus. Scipio. Karuna. Lakshmi. Vishnu. Atman. As light and shadows are in one, neither optimistic nor pessimistic, only aware of the surroundings, in a mindful, watchful state. Through these stories, he became thoroughly aware of the universe. Thank you very much.